So nice to see y'all. I love how, after we do the greeting and I sit down and do the readings, and I get up here and I'm like, oh, a few others have appeared. It's always so nice. Honestly, don't ever feel bad for coming in late. It's totally fine. I love I've read this about recovery meetings, how, a lot of us in church, when people come in late, we tend to grumble, rah, 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 right? But in recovery meetings, when people come in late, it's like, thank God they're here. And that's the spirit I think we hold here. So I just want to say that. And Austin, thank you for your lovely reading. That's the way you read is so beautiful. The voice, it kind of like, I wish I had that voice in my head when I read sometimes. So I'm just very grateful for y'all, church. So, how are you doing? If you're like me, you respond to this question like this. Oh, I'm fine, living the dream. And followed by an awkward laugh. But sometimes when I'm on the asking end of things, I've learned as a pastor to follow it up with, no, really, like, how are you doing? Like, how's your soul? If we're really honest, we can remove our sweaty masks before wiping the perspiration from our brows and confessing, we're tired. Tired of sprinting through this hamster wheel of life. Tired of running on fumes. Worn down by the packed calendars and endless emails that blow us about by every wind. With no time to think, no time to reflect, no time to process, no time to just be. I took Rory to the dentist like a month ago, and I was sitting there waiting for her to get done. And I was just sitting there, and no one else was in the waiting room. And I just found myself just like kind of scrolling through my phone for no reason, just scrolling. And I'm like, wait, like, this is a holy moment. You can actually sit and process things. It's interesting how we don't give ourselves that time, or we don't have that time. Sometimes we just don't have that time, but you know what I mean. Because I think underneath it all is a dreadful question we tend to stuff down at every cost. Is this really all there is? Just one seemingly urgent yet mundane thing after another. I read this really fascinating article in The Atlantic this week titled, "The Real Reason People Aren't Having Kids." Now, this is not to shame anyone for not having, that's not the posture I'm taking here. So just know that right off the bat, that's not what I'm saying. What breaks my heart is this spiritual deficit at the heart of the matter for everyone, right? That's what really I kind of grabbed onto in this article. But what the article kind of says is that it's not rational things like concerns over finances, climate change, political instability, or even potential war. In listening to people's stories, the writer determined the deeper reason was the uncertainty people have about the value of life and a reason for being. It says this: many in the current generation of young adults don't seem totally convinced of their own purpose or the purpose of humanity at large, let alone that of a child. We're haunted here by the echo of the wisdom writer in Ecclesiastes. What do mortals get from all the toil and strain with which they toil under the sun? For all their days are full of pain, and their work is a vexation. Even at night, their minds do not rest. How many of you, like me, scroll through your phones late at night, the glowing screen keeping you awake? Isn't a good life one where we strive after good things, good virtues, good habits, good goals, good relationships, good things like a good house, a good car, good job, etc.? A lot of us in this room have actually managed to attain those things. I always say, if I can afford to pay someone $6 to make me a cup of coffee, I'm rich. But have you noticed the satisfaction we thought these things would bring us is fleeting at best? The goalposts constantly move. As soon as we reach the top rung of the ladder, 10 more rungs appear above it. And so we keep climbing. Again, from Ecclesiastes, I considered all that my hands had done, and the toil I had spent in doing it. All was vanity and chasing after the wind. We're tired. I don't know if you remember the scene where Satan tempts Jesus high above the temple. He doesn't tempt Jesus with things like alcohol or too much Netflix. He tempts him with very practical means. If you're God, then turn the stone to bread, Jesus. Give the people what they want. Give them what they need. Now, some of us need bread, right? No doubt. When you're starving, you need food. Jesus meets people here. The Christian church has long been a proponent of feeding people. But Jesus keeps going, and he cuts about 15 layers deeper than this. To Satan's temptation, Jesus sternly replies, "No, people do not live by bread alone." Material satiation keeps our hearts beating, but it only gets us so far. The government statistics in the article that I mentioned earlier can only operate in the material world. It analogizes children to goods like a car or a house, and it relates them to what the parents can afford on paper with their time or money. So it offers material solutions like giving parents more money and time, which I'm all for, by the way. But we see that these problems are important indeed, but temporal at best. The core is the existential question, what's even the point? We work so hard for these things that perish, and they all leave us in the end. Even our own bodies will turn to dust. So then why? What's it all for? Has it all been for nothing? Will anyone remember us in another generation or two? I hate to get so nihilistic. You're still here. Thank you. We're not going to end the homily here, you guys. But this is as far as it goes for a lot of people in our world today. Fewer and fewer people have a working concept of the beyond. When your worldview has been flattened and limited to the material world, and even Christians fall prey to this, you are truly building your life on sand that slips through your fingers with every tick of the clock. This is life in what philosopher Charles Taylor calls the immanent frame, the entirely secularized world. Where else can this narrative lead but to depression? Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. They say the ego speaks first and speaks loudest. The first voice we hear from the ego is one that calls us to distraction, like I felt in the dentist office. Don't think about it, just keep scrolling, keep on hustling, keep on the grind, and chase your importance. Then it flips straight into nihilism when we see how fruitless it is. But see, you and I are creatures of longing. We need, we yearn. This is why we have language. If we came to this planet entirely self-sufficient and whole, we wouldn't need to communicate. We'd be perfectly self-enclosed beings. But God is not a single isolated unit, a chunk of flesh or a measure of materiality. God is a triune relationship. As images of this triune relationship, we are designed to need what is outside of us to make complete that which is inside of us. To believe in Jesus is absurd because it means to believe that God springs out of the death of God. New life springs not out of wholeness or completeness, but out of death. Death is our salvation, and we all get it at least once. Death is generative. It is not the end. We can't stop the lack we feel inside, and the point isn't to quench it with false, perishable things, but to trust that God is at work in the loss, in the lack, in the longing. When I think about the younger generation, so thirsty for meaning, and I think of myself, so thirsty for meaning, I know we can't point to a statistic and say, look, the meaning of life is right here. You will make $100,000 a year, get free Wi-Fi forever, retire at age 60, and die at age 87 in your sleep the day after running a 5K on your birthday surrounded by your grandkids. And your kids are guaranteed admission to Harvard, where they'll just do the same exact thing. I mean, this sounds amazing, honestly, in some ways, but really it's all dust. And the human heart knows it. It's based on Western economics, not God's economy. In the article, it says, as attractive as economics may be as a solution to the riddle of the growing ambivalence about having children, it's partial at best. There it is. The stone wall at the end of the secular world. And this is from The Atlantic, not from like a conservative, go have kids, everyone, publication, right? Church, we need bread, for sure. But we need more than bread alone. We need Jesus. Not in a legalistic way, but in a freeing, life-giving way. We need to hear that life is not a guarantee of comfort and control, but an adventure that springs out of the heartache and bruises and death. Jesus isn't here to cover us in bubble wrap, but to emerge out of our wounds and our scars. So go, live, bleed. God crafted you perfectly, and she knew what she was doing when she breathed life into your lungs, slapped you on the butt, and sent you into the world. And this God, in Jesus, through the Holy Spirit, will never leave you. Think of the moments that have really shaped you, that have brought you closer to others. Have those moments been like when you wanted that new truck and you got it? I'd venture to say probably not. I'd say that the things that have shaped you the most have been when new life has sprung out of the moments you would never have written into your own stories if you were the author. In other words, your death experiences. Maybe the death of a loved one, or a job loss. Maybe a failed marriage, an addiction, a derailed business venture. Becoming a parent is a death experience. Your pre-parental self is gone forever, and a new life emerges in its place. Our most redemptive moments come as unexpected gifts. You've had people who swept onto the scene of your life like angels on a covert rescue mission. You've been met with unexpected joys that pierce the darkness surrounding you. When you were lost, you may have been found at just the right moment. This is life. This insight rearranges everything. If the best things in life come freely as unexpected gifts rather than through our calculated and white-knuckling striving for control, then what's the point of it all? Like, what are we supposed to do? Just leave the doing and accomplishing to God? Do we just sit around like helpless bystanders to life? Well, here's how it seems to work. If God's grace really hits your heart in your lowest moments, I'd say it's impossible to merely be a bystander. When you walk by faith, you'll have plenty to do. But you won't be doing it in a white-knuckled, hopeless frenzy. Your plate will be filled by Him with food that does not perish. And you will busy yourself only with what God places in your hands in each moment, not a crumb more or less. It's interesting how it works. When we think we are in control of our lives, we always run out of fuel. Does anyone feel out of fuel right now? It's never enough. But when we know that Jesus has finished the race for us, we see that our running is not out of obligation, but out of freedom. We run not like a desperate hamster in the wheel while our lives are not moving an inch, but like a kid at recess, skinned knee under giant grass stains, who loses track of time and sees no end to her means but the present sacred moment of joy that God has given her. So I'll end with what Christ says through the prophet Isaiah. Those who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint.